Welcome to my YouTube channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. My wife once cheated on me. Once was enough. I'm sure she thought she had everything under control and was very surprised by how I handled it. The unfolding events were a typical story. Married for 15 years, things had become quite boring. We grew apart, living in the same house, under the same roof, but in different rooms. She distanced herself from me. At some point, I noticed that we were no longer partners, no longer confidants, no longer lovers. She left too many hints. I did some investigating and digging. It turned out she had an affair, at least an emotional one. She started complaining to me. It was normal, and I had stopped listening to her complaints and mockeries over the years. Now, with this new evidence, I not only heard her, I listened. She was unhappy with our marriage. She had fallen out of love with me. It was clear to me. If I had tried to bring up the fact that she was wrong, that we could fix our love, that I loved her, and we could restore our marriage, she would have just distanced herself from me even more. She just looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw another bridge between us crumbling. To hell with all this, I said to myself, finishing my beer. I replayed our last argument in my mind. Over and over again, I was trying to find a way to win her back. After all, she was mine. It seemed, I thought to myself, that every time I tried harder to get my wife back, she drifted even further away from me. I sat up late at night, allowing my wife to sleep in our big family bed while I nursed my wounded feelings. Somewhere along the way, my mind kicked in, and a new way of thinking burst through. Why did I argue with her about what she was feeling? Indeed, why? At that moment, I realized that everything my wife had been telling me was true, a truth I couldn't just ignore or talk her out of. She was sharing her feelings with me, and here I was, arguing with her, telling her she was wrong, that she wasn't really feeling those feelings. How foolish was that? How can you tell someone they are wrong about their feelings? Well, it stopped right then. What she felt was what she felt, so why argue about it? So what was I feeling? Strange. No, actually, it was strange because, as I sat in the darkness on the couch thinking about my recent relationship with my wife, I realized that I too was unhappy. I was no longer sure that I loved her. I was in love with the idea of still being together and being married to my loving wife. But that wasn't reality, was it? This moment of epiphany shook me. It took me some time to put everything together, but now I had a plan of action. Whether it worked or not, at that moment, I didn't care because I now knew that what I was doing and what she was doing wasn't working. What does this mean? The definition of insanity is trying the same thing that didn't work over and over again, thinking it will work this time. I smiled, threw my beer bottles into the trash bin, and decided to sleep in the guest bedroom. All this was part of the plan. Frank. Linda opened the door to the guest bedroom and flicked on the light switch, depriving me of sleep. Why are you sleeping in the guest room? I squinted against the light until my eyes adjusted to the bright light. I stayed up late. Didn't want to disturb you, I said. She looked at me, then shuffled off to the kitchen for some coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, as I was blessed with the ability to wake up and be alert immediately. I jumped into the shower and prepared for the confrontation. Today, my step was springy. Linda sat across from me in the living room. I was in my usual position on the sofa. Linda clenched her fists. She was agitated, and I could feel she was about to say something. Frank, she began, this isn't working. I feel disappointed and lost, and I don't think I love you anymore. I sat and looked at her. She paused, then continued. Frank, I know we've been together a long time, but I think we need to get a divorce. The word hung in the air. I smiled as she nervously looked at me. That sounds good, dear, I said. She blinked. Frank, did you hear me? I nodded. Yes, of course, I heard you. You feel that it's not working. You don't love me. You want a divorce. I agree. Do you understand? Now she was bewildered. I stood up and approached her. I knelt down in front of her. Linda, I can't change how you feel. You don't love me. How can I argue against that? Can I tell you that you are wrong? No, you don't love me. Well, to be honest, there were many times in our life when I didn't love you either. If you feel you can no longer live with me, well, again, how can I argue with that? Linda looked at me as if I were insane. However, deep down, I saw that she nodded to my keen ability to understand that what she said was true, and she appreciated it. Wait, You said you didn't love me? She asked. There were times, just like for you. She was a bit shaken. All the time she had played this little scene in her head, she never expected that I would react this way. I liked seeing how her emotions were reflected on her face. Well, I said, anything else? I need to leave tonight, so I would like to settle this now, if you don't mind. Are you leaving right now? I stood up and began to put on my jacket, preparing to leave. No. Frank, where are you going? I'm leaving. I think I'll hit a few bars. I think I might start looking for someone else instead of you right now. I waved goodbye to her and left her sitting in the chair with her mouth open. I stopped at the nearest bar. There, I ordered a bourbon and sat at one of the tables away from the crowd. I took out my mobile phone and initiated another part of my plan. I called a coworker. Jessica worked with me in my department and was known as the company gossip. Playing the role of the poor, abandoned husband, I solemnly relayed to her the conversation I had with my wife, particularly how she had stunned me with her request for a divorce. The reason I called her, and not the real reason, was that I was in the bar, drowning my sorrows in whiskey, and might not show up for work the next day. I could hear the wheels turning in her head, since Jessica and I occasionally flirted at work, and she was single. The next thing I remember is that Jessica invited herself out with me for the evening under the pretense of looking after me and being the friend I needed while I was in such a vulnerable, emotional state. I met Jessica at a bar that I knew my wife and her friends often frequented. Was I concerned that someone might see me? No, my marriage was apparently over. My wife didn't love me, and frankly, I didn't love my wife Linda at the moment either. Jessica looked good. She arrived quickly, dressed attractively and seductively, perhaps hoping to reach me before someone else had a chance. At least that's what I like to believe. But when she saw me, she was somewhat surprised that my body language and mood did not match the news I had relayed to her over the phone. The smile on my face didn't help either. Frank, what's happening? She asked, sitting next to me. With a puzzled expression, I raised my hand and pointed to my ring finger, which was now bare. She wants a divorce. That's how she feels. Why should I fight it? I called the waiter over and ordered another drink. Jessica ordered her usual Cosmo. Frank, over the phone you seemed more upset. Jess, we've been unhappy for a while. I finally realized that maybe I don't love her like I used to. She wants this divorce, so you know what? I'm not going to fight it. She wants to leave? Fine, I'm not going to lie around, forgotten and unloved. Jessica took a big sip of her cocktail. She sat and looked at me. Now I realized that I was having an effect on this woman. Whatever my attitude, I noticed it was confusing her. Maybe we should dance. I didn't wait for her response, just grabbed her hand and led her to the dance floor. Frank, what are you planning to do? I held her closer to me. I'm going to give her everything she thinks she wants. I'm going to do whatever I want. Right now, I want to dance with you. In fact, I've wanted to dance with you for a long time. Now I can. She looked into my eyes and smiled. If you're trying to get back at her, I raised an eyebrow. Maybe. She pressed her whole body against me, feeling comfortable and warm. I'm okay with that, she sighed. We lost track of time. It was so nice not to worry about having to call home to tell Linda when I would be back. Jessica was fun, intelligent, and we flirted all evening. She was completely mine. She knew it, I knew it. But I didn't take her home with me. It was really nice to know that someone wanted me. My wife had bruised my ego, but Jessica had bolstered it. Moreover, I would say that Jessica was a more attractive woman than Linda. We kissed in the parking lot by her car. I opened the door for her and smiled. See you tomorrow at work. She nodded. I made it clear that I just needed some fun right now, and I wasn't about to commit to another woman. In my not-so-subtle way, which Jessica understood, I was now looking for someone for myself. I'm sure that by the end of work tomorrow, all the women in the company will know about it. I would like to tell you that I am a calm man, but the truth is, I was looking forward to rubbing this in Linda's face a bit. Where have you been? Linda snapped at me when I entered the house. She was in bed, but as soon as she heard me come in, she got up to meet me. I put away my coat in the closet and started to undress for bed. I went out, I said. I told you I was leaving. Why should you care? Frank, I was a bit worried you might do something bad to yourself. I smiled at her. Linda, I know how you feel. I'm okay with it. You want a divorce, I will gladly give you one. I'm far from wanting to force you to live with someone you no longer love. I took my pillow and clothes for the next morning and headed to the guest room. Frank, Linda called out hesitantly. I stopped, shifting my things to the other hand. What? She looked down. She couldn't face me. I don't understand. I mean, you don't have to sleep in another bed. Are you suggesting that you will sleep in another bed, move out of our bedroom? I didn't want to make it easy for her. She gasped and wiped away a tear. I didn't mean that. I mean, you can share the bed with me. That is, if you want to. If you don't want to, well, I guess I could move to another room. She was nervous. The thought of actually moving out of her bedroom was something she had never anticipated. She held her breath in fear that I would make her do just that. I spared her the agony. Well, this bed is more comfortable. I'll stay here with you if it's not too much trouble. Her face brightened. Oh yes, that would be wonderful. I mean, it's no problem for me. Then it's settled, I said and tossed the pillow back onto the bed. She wanted to talk, but I was too tired and told her to go to bed. We would have time to talk later. Indeed, by the next evening, 3 women at work had made advances towards me. I even had a friend give me his sister's number. She was a widow and had been struggling to find someone to date. I arranged dates for the upcoming week with all 4 women, including another one with Jessica. I intentionally kept this evening free because I needed to talk with Linda. We needed to sort everything out. I suppose she needed to live her own life. I returned home and faced Linda. Carol saw you last night at the bar. She said you were with a woman. Who the hell was she? What were you doing together? Carol said the 2 of you looked very comfortable with each other. I could have exploded at her. I could have yelled at her, called her an easy woman for hanging out, talking to men, neglecting me, drifting away from me, but I didn't. I smiled and told her I would answer her questions after I change. She tried to challenge me, but I ignored her and went to change into my home clothes. Once comfortable, I noticed that Linda was staring intently at me. She was ready for a fight. Her eyes were close to tears, but her body was tense with anger. It was Jessica, from work, I told her. I didn't deny it. I'm sure she thought I would start making excuses, but I didn't. What were you doing together? She asked accusingly. I looked at her and simply said, we were on a date. On a date? She shrieked. I nodded and continued to sit calmly. You have no right. We are married. What makes you think you can do that? I stood up, got a drink from the kitchen, and sat down again. She was still standing, staring intently at me, waiting for my response. Why should it bother you? I asked. She stared at me, mouth agape. We are married. But you want a divorce, don't you? She nodded, unsure of her voice. You said you don't love me, right? I said I'm not in love with you. She corrected me. And I agree with you, Linda. You're no longer in love with me. So why shouldn't I go and look for love with someone else? You want a divorce. You don't love me. What reason do I have to stay here with you? She sat down, actually, slumped into her chair. What will people say? Don't you realize what that looks like? Now Carol is gossiping all over town about my husband dating some slutty woman. Don't you dare call Jessica a slutty woman. I growled. She was a perfect lady, and I was a gentleman last night. She only went on a date with a married man. I call that a promiscuous woman. So, I said angrily, standing up and pacing in front of her. She's not married. And if she's a promiscuous woman, what would you call a married woman who only dates other men without her husband's knowledge? Linda stared at me. She was speechless. I could see her thoughts working. How much does he know? She panicked. What does that have to do with me? She exploded. I just looked at her. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. I remained silent. She saw it in my face. I knew. Her body began to shake. HHH, how much do you know? Enough, I shouted. Whether you slept with them or not, I really don't care. You see, my dear, this marriage was over when you decided to count me out. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm moving on. I'm going to take care of myself, considering I get no support from my wife at home. I got up and went to the kitchen. Dinner wasn't ready. I decided to make something for myself. She could cook for herself. A little later, she entered the kitchen and watched as I finished my dinner. I'm very sorry, she said to me. I put away the dishes and turned to her. I'm sorry too. I think you should know that I have plans for the rest of the week, so don't expect me home early. If you prefer, I can sleep in the guest room. She didn't respond. I went upstairs to go to bed. I decided to sleep in the guest room. I'm sure Linda had a restless night. I met Christina after work. She was a sweet blonde, about 35, divorced, with 2 children. We chatted over coffee and then did something really silly. I took her to play laser tag, a team game using safe laser guns and sensors to record hits. Yes, it was us, 2 adults against 10 teenagers, who all ganged up on us and kept annihilating us at the start of each game. Christina enjoyed it. I liked sitting and talking with her after we were killed, waiting for the next game to start. At one point during the last game, both of us were killed, and we fell side by side and pretended to be dead. I pulled her towards me while we were lying there and kissed her. She kissed me back. Then we had a nice dinner, and soon I walked her back to her house, where we kissed goodbye. She said farewell to me before things went beyond kissing, and she made me promise to ask her out again soon. I braced myself for another confrontation with Linda when I returned, but surprisingly, she seemed subdued. Hello, she said. I smiled and greeted her as I undressed after the date. It seems you had a good time, she told me. Her emotions were concealed. That's true. Thanks for noticing. How was your evening? We talked. For the first time in months, we sat down and talked until late at night. I listened to her, and she listened to me. I have never had sex with anyone else, Frank. I swear to you, she confessed. I kissed a few men and shared my thoughts and feelings with Justin at work. He wanted more from me, but I wasn't ready. Linda, I'm sure we are both to blame for this, but even though you didn't actually have sex with anyone else, you still betrayed me. We were a team. I'm glad that you refrained from cheating on me before asking for a divorce. I really respect you for that. I should have listened to your feelings instead of arguing with them. Yes, she agreed. We sat in silence for a while. Frank, I'm confused right now. I don't know if I want a divorce. I smiled. Let me know when you figure it out. I'm not kicking you out of the house, and I'm not planning to leave anytime soon. Frank? I was already up and about to go to bed. Are you still going to see Jessica? Yes. I'm currently seeing her, and others too. Do what you want to do. Figure things out. I need to do what's best for me. If we end up getting a divorce, well, then it wasn't meant to be. I headed to the guest bedroom. She followed me and stopped in the doorway. Frank? I turned to see her as I was taking off my shirt. Come back to bed, please. I hesitated. Do you think that's wise? Tears streamed down her face. I don't know. I just want you right now. I reached out to her, and she threw herself into my arms and sobbed. She was confused. She didn't know what to feel. I carried her back to our bed. I held her as we fell asleep. Lauren was a good friend of mine. She was a fan, and we always talked about the latest TV shows and fandom stuff. We were at a neat bar with live music, which she was eager to go to, but none of her friends or dates were interested. That evening, I took her with me. It was fun, and although we had occasionally flirted at work, there was absolutely no chemistry between us as romantic partners. We had a good time, but we were just friends. That was enough for both of us, and I got home early. I pulled up to the house and found a car parked in the driveway. My jealousy briefly reared its ugly head, but I calmed down and reminded myself that whatever happens, happens. There's no point in worrying, right? I learned this from my psychiatrist while being treated for my fear of flying. Instead of panicking and thinking, oh God, I'm about to get on a plane, he made me shift to an excited and anticipatory tone. Oh God, I'm about to get on a plane, I can't wait. It took some practice, but it generally worked. In the short term, not knowing what to expect, I repeated my mantra and opened the door to see Linda sitting and chatting with Carol, one of her friends. Frank, I didn't expect you to be back so early. Linda, Carol. I nodded at them. Carol shot me daggers with her eyes. She said nothing. Work finished early, so here I am. Do you need some privacy? Linda and Carol exchanged glances, then Carol rose from the couch. I should be going. Linda, I'll talk to you soon. Linda walked Carol to the door. Carol gave me a disdainful look, said nothing to me, and left. Sorry for intruding. I didn't mean to interrupt your evening, I said to her. Don't be silly, Frank. This is your home too. Home. When was the last time she or I called this place our home? Have you eaten? She asked me. There were leftovers from what she and Carol had apparently shared. I poked at the food while she busied herself cleaning up the kitchen. How are you? I asked. She sat down. I'm okay, I think. I invited Carol over to talk, but she only confused me more. How so? She wanted me to kick you out, change the locks, and divorce your ass. Well, My key still works, so I guess you didn't have time to call the locksmith? She laughed. Don't be silly. I had to explain to her that I was the one who asked for the divorce. After I told you that, what rights do I have over you? I left you, right? She looked intently into my eyes. That last part was a question she desperately wanted an answer to. I wanted to jump up and dispel her fears, tell her that I still belonged to her. But I didn't. I said nothing. In the past, my assurances would have pushed her away. Maybe this new non-committal stance might have a different impact on her. Changing the subject, I blurted out. I'm afraid I have some bad news. My date for tomorrow night canceled. Now I'm stuck with concert tickets. Maybe you'd like to go with me instead of another girl? Her face brightened. Oh, Frank, I would love to. I mean, if you want. I shrugged. Well, I could give these tickets to someone at work. No, she said decisively. I mean, I would be happy to go. Happy to go with me? She blushed and nodded. Are you sure? I asked. Yes, she whispered. I smiled. This could be fun.